You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There is a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for the week of December 15th, 2023. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where people are still bitching about inflation, but you know what? Somehow the restaurants are packed with lobbyists and interest groups and activists, all having their year-end parties. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal.
Hi, Driftglass.
How you doing?
All right. I want to start off by thanking local trivia host Russ Friedwald for having me, little old Blue Gal, on his new podcast.
Oh, no. You never promote another podcast on this show.
Oh, I'm going to promote other podcasts on this show today, Driftglass, because I was on one. You know, just like last week when you were on the Bradcast and we got to promote that.
Oh, that's right. I remember. Yeah, the patriarchy. Yeah, you're right.
I was on a podcast called Tangents, and I will tell you, it is a trivia quiz show that runs less than 30 minutes. It's very fun. I did have a couple of brain farts on his show where I didn't remember George Lucas and I didn't remember Bulworth, even though I could see them in my mind. It was one of those things. But I had a lot of fun. And the podcast called Tangents is really worth checking out. It's a short, fun listen. You'll have a good time. We've been doing online trivia with Russ since the pandemic.
Yeah.
And we're going to return to that once Fargo is over, because right now Tuesday nights are reserved for watching Fargo. Speaking of that, we're also thinking of doing a bonus podcast about what we've been watching lately. So before the end of the year, we'll plug that in as well. And finally, I want to tell everyone, some people perhaps only listen to our Thursday show and don't listen to the Tuesday shows. This past Tuesday's show on immigration, I think, was one of the best we've ever done in terms of information you can use to talk with your neighbors and friends about politics in 2024. Mm-hmm. I highly recommend you go and listen to it. I learned a lot from researching it, and we had a good conversation. So that Tuesday, No Fair Remembering stuff on immigration, it's rich in information that we can all use. Today, speaking of news, Fox News broke away from the daily White House press briefing, because no one was asking about the House's no evidence impeachment inquiry, Driftglass.
Yeah, there's a lot of things they don't ask about.
But they just ignored it because Congress went home yesterday. They voted on that. Then they voted on the defense authorization, and then they went home for Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Done.
And Fox's John Roberts said, if Donald Trump had been the subject of an impeachment inquiry, that room would have been on fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's starting to catch up, Driftglass.
Slowly.
You know, there was a recording of Trump blackmailing the president of Ukraine.
Extorting.
And extorting money, extorting information on investigating Joe Biden in exchange for needed weapon systems.
Yep. Yep.
And then there was also a recording of Donald Trump with Georgia election officials.
There was. And is.
You know, that's called evidence.
Doesn't matter to these people.
It doesn't matter.
Not one iota. It doesn't matter one iota.
They voted for this no evidence impeachment inquiry, so they won't get primaried.
As you know, I talked earlier, expecting suddenly any of these people to stop being who they are is like yelling at zombies to stop being zombies. They're going to keep being zombies until there's one put in their melon, until the zombie killer comes and takes them all out. This is just who they are, and none of this matters anymore to them. And
they're not playing the same game that Democrats are in terms of trying to govern.
No, they don't. They don't care about governing at all.
They're here for the grift.
That's it.
And that's it.
And there's many millions of them, and we have to figure a way to put them out of business. Now we sort of talked about this, believe it or not, at our liberal adult Sunday school class, which we're not going to evangelize about, just discuss, because we do discuss how the Bible was wrong. And how, the book of Revelations was revenge porn by a bitter old man on the island of Patmos. It's not, so we talk about things that get us in trouble with the more conservative members of the congregation. But we had a pretty spirited discussion about theology and history and violence and the future of the church. And there was an awful lot of talk among these lovely people about what we should do, how we need to protest more, and we need to bring more pressure, and we need to do this and that. And I kept thinking to myself, but not saying out loud, because why start a fight every day of my life?
With people who are our friends and on our side,
absolutely.
right?
There's why? You and I are just further down this curve than they are.
Yeah, we've been on this donkey for a long time, right?
But, and several of these people have too. But we did protest, and we were out protesting, and the largest peacetime protest in history was the Iraq War, and the media ignored it
until
turned their backs.
Pussy hat. And then they ignored it again. Yeah. Right.
So
right.
We do these things. Mm-hmm. And then there was a lot of talk about what the media should do. Here's, if the media did this, that, and the other thing, then things would be better. And
my knee just bumped into Driftglass's knee over and over again.
Shut up. Shut up.
Don't say anything.
Don't do it.
Don't get on a soapbox.
I waited until after the class and said, by the way, fuck David Brooks. And then
you kind of did.
I kind of did. I said, if your plan for taking the country back and returning us to a more democratic formation is, here's what the media should do, then you need a different plan. Because let me emphasize, the media, there is no such thing as the media anyway. There's all these little islands and cays and rivulets, et cetera. But by and large, that's never, ever, ever going to happen. So get past that belief that the fairy godfather of the media will come and save you.
Yeah, Walter Cronkite's dead.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen. So then finish the question, and then what? What do we do after we acknowledge the fact that the Republican Party are zombies who will never listen to reason and will never ever stop trying to destroy us, and the media is never going to come to our aid? Now what do you do? And that's where the discussion can get kind of spicy. Now, on that subject, I'd like to read just a bit of this interview in Salon by Chauncey DeVega, who interviewed Professor Jason Stanley, who was one of the first people with a prominent public platform to sound the alarm about Trump and the MAGA movement. He's the Jacob Urowski Professor of Philosophy at Yale, and he's written books about fascism, and an all-around interesting guy to get on this topic. And this is the quote: "If you are just now realizing that Trump is a fascist, you're going to be looking for signs to assuage yourself that you're just being hysterical, because you spent so many years calling those of us who have been correctly describing reality hysterical. Yeah, the people who the media are turning to now as alarm sounders are not equipped to understand what is really happening. Trump is muddying the waters for those people who have not been paying attention to politics. Those good centrist Americans, those independents, those I don't really pay attention to politics people. Well, it will just seem like two people calling each other names. Biden and Trump are both saying each other is a threat to democracy, which is obviously not true. Trump has been charged with actual crimes. Trump's literally saying, quote, I'm going to arrest Joe Biden, unquote, and all these other quote unquote enemies because they're not bowing down to him. In the end, for most Americans, it's going to seem like polarization and partisanship with the two sides fighting. The media has consistently normalized and enabled Trump. The American news media keeps featuring these talking heads and experts and the like who will make the American people feel better about themselves and feel better about the crisis. That is irresponsible, unquote, which is basically what we've been saying on this podcast since day one. And you and I have been blogging about for all going on 20 years now. So, this is nothing new, but it's nice to hear occasionally someone who isn't the voice in my head yelling about the fact that, people don't want to believe that we're in a crisis, don't want to believe this is true. They want to believe it's just politics, just two sides yelling at each other. And that lets them sleep at night as opposed to,
Driftglass, I try to stay informed. I watch PBS NewsHour every night.
Yeah.
And that is the middle class white, intellectual, college educated approach.
I watch Meet the Press, and I
watch PBS NewsHour, and that David Brooks seems like a reasonable guy.
He seems like such a reasonable. He's one of the good ones,
And that's how the extent to which they want to deal with this, and that's not the way it is.
No.
About a week ago, 10 Grain at Mock Paper Scissors had a terrific post about Carrie Lake and the Star Trek original series Mirror Mirror universe.
Yeah.
You remember that one, Driftglass. It's
I do.
Talk with the goatee.
That's when I decided to wear a goatee for the rest of my life.
Because you're part of the Empire.
Well, because logic is true regardless of the universe you're in.
That's true. That's true. Tengrade's point was that Republicans who are good at winning MAGA primaries get to the general election and they can't pretend to be sane.
Right.
Once the general election rolls around, they're still crazy. And you and I and other liberal analysts have known this for several election cycles. We both remember Sharon Angle running against Harry Reid. And Second Amendment solutions to problems was one of the things she said. And when you get to a general election, you lose when you talk like that.
You know, there is legitimate rape, Blue Gal.
Legitimate rape. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Missouri. That was Missouri. But Republican primary voters will not be tamed because they are still living off of the high, as I said last week, of their surprise 2016 win.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, Steve M. at No More Mr. Nice blog noted that the only Republican candidate so far announced for U.S. Senate in Wisconsin is Sheriff David Clark. And so Steve M. said, if no one else appears to be running for the Senate seat in Wisconsin, it's really time for Democrats to nationalize that election too.
Oh yes. Oh my yes. Yep.
And really we're going to nationalize Kerry Lake and nationalize Sheriff Clark. The only thing I'll add to that, Driftglass, is GOP primary is going to be lit.
They're going to be lit.
They're going to be lit. Keep watching for it.
You own that, Blue Gal. Now,
I do.
In case any of you out there thought the New York Times was the way it was or is the way it is because somehow the building is haunted. You know, the sort of like, I hear this a lot, this sort of, it's the institution, the institutional organization, as if the bricks and mortar and the steel girders are the problem. That they're somehow haunted by the spirit of bad things and they make the people in the building think dumb things and terrible things. Except it's not. That's not the reason they put people like Brett Stevens on the payroll. The reason they put the people on the payroll is the people that run the place, the executives, are the problem. They're the problem. The publisher is the problem. The op-ed page editor is the problem. And the reason we know this is that the previous op-ed page editor, James Bennett, is now a big wig at The Economist because you can never get fired or fail downward. You always fail upward when you're a member of the elite pundit class. And in his new capacity at The Economist, Mr. Bennett has written a 17,000-word essay essentially saying New York Times is fucked because they fired me. And
17,000 words?
17,000 words of, you fired me and now you're screwed. You've completely gone and lost your minds. You know, and believe me, having been fired from jobs and then watched the organizations collapse, I understand. But in this case, it's not true because he was, and his predecessors, the people that think like him, are the fucking problem. And this was described accurately by one wag on Twitter whose name I don't have. It's not me, I promise. As, quote, a delusional and vindictive rant by someone who hasn't learned a single thing from all of this. It should embarrass Bennett and his defenders to lecture others about healthy disagreement while consistently demonstrating a total inability to listen and respond to his critics. This root of this was the Tom Cotton, the infamous Tom Cotton op-ed that the New York Times solicited from Tom Cotton. It was outrageous. It was horrifying. And they put it in their paper. And when people lost their shit over it, why are you putting this fascist senator on the op-ed page of the New York Times? Bennett decided he would lecture his staff about the need to be open-minded and other opinions and blah, blah, blah. Because
just like the Wall Street Journal is, Driftglass.
That's right.
Open-minded.
That's right. And, you know, that apparently was enough for a few people to say, that's it. No. We've had it. And so that brainworm, that let's just let the worst fucking humans on earth have their real estate in our newspaper because we got to hear from all the sides. Even as they are telling us to our face they plan to drag us off and put us in prison, we got to publish them because, something, 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 I don't know, both sides. So, no, it's not the bricks and mortar and girders and glass in the building. It's the people who work there, the executives who work there, the publisher, and Mr. James Bennett. People like that. That's the problem.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And don't forget that Tom Cotton's op-ed was about arguing that the federal government could invoke the Insurrection Act.
Yeah. No, it
was a fascist column, right?
Yeah. And I got to say, the one exception to all that is Barry Weiss, who was there for a minute. And of course, she's gone to do on such great things since then.
Mm-hmm.
She was that rare liberal, tough-minded exception that went on to form a liberal university in Texas and do great liberal. I'm lying, of course. She's just another one of these fuckers who comes out of that whelping box and just, everything we thought about her and him and the rest of them turned out to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tom Cotton, those Black Lives Matter protesters need to have the U.S. military brought up against them.
Yeah.
It's just another opinion, Driftglass. We all need to hear from all sides.
Right. And yeah.
On a lighter note, the Daily Beast has reported this week that the Trump Legal Defense Fund's financial filings indicate that their biggest expense was entertainment and parties at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so sweet.
He's the biggest con man ever.
Yeah,
folks.
He is. He might very well be.
And Ms. Baba, his attorney, should take note of that.
Haba.
Because, Haba, excuse me, Haba. Her name is Haba. That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She should take note that he is paying himself long before he pays her.
Well, in every success book, in every one of those self-help books, pay yourself first.
Pay yourself
boy,
first.
Howdy.
Trump attorneys.
He never gets past the first chapter, does he? It's just
no,
pay yourself
he never does.
first.
You pay yourself first and I'm done. Yeah.
Now, on the subject of the word "we," I mentioned that with our liberal Sunday school class. You and we have talked about the subject of the word "we" many, many times in this podcast, the fallacy of the idea of "we." And I'm going to read you two things. And the first is from Mark Leibowitz in the Atlantic magazine this week. And it got all kinds of play. It was all over the place. He was being interviewed all over the place about it. It was, I think, the frontline headline story in the Atlantic. Big deal. And the headline is, "Trump voters are America too," which is technically true. "If he wins a second term, perhaps we'll finally dispense with the myth that, quote, this is not who we are, unquote. In the last spring of the Obama administration, Michelle Obama was delivering her final commencement address as First Lady at City College of New York. Then, as now, the specter of Donald Trump had become the inescapable backdrop to everything. He'd spent the past year smashing every precept of restraint, every dignified tradition of the supposedly kind-hearted nation he was seeking to lead. Obama couldn't help but lob some barely cloaked denunciation of Trump's wrecking ball presidential campaign, the one that would soon be ratified with the Republican nomination. Quote, this is not who we are, unquote. The First Lady assured the graduates, that's not what this country stands for. No. The promise did not age well. Not that November and not since. This is not who we are. The would-be guardians of America's better angels have been scolding us with this line for years. Or maybe they mean it as an affirmation. Either way, the axiom prompts a question, who is we anyway? Mm-hmm. Because it sure seems like a lot of this we keeps voting for Trump. Today, the dictum sounds more like a liberal wish than any true assessment of our national character, unquote. In other words, there's no we in America. Mm-hmm. And it's high time we started to recognize the fact that there is no we in this country. Now, this is from some asshole liberal blogger I know in March of 2006.
Might be the one I'm married to. We'll have to see.
Not 2016. March of 2006. This was during the height of the Bush administration. Remember the Bush administration?
The before time, you mean?
Yeah. A lot of people
My boss, whatever you may think of him, Nicole Wallace.
Nicole Wallace has compressed those entire 8 years into one word. My boss, whatever you may think of him. Yeah. This post is entitled, There's No We in America. I'm now quoting myself shamelessly. Quote, for a long time now, the casual invocation of the term the American people when explaining that we as a nation do or do not believe or will not stand for, especially by the right, but also by the left, has been pissing me right off because at the moment, there is no more we in this country. It breaks my heart, but I believe the strategic and relentless poisoning of the public well by the likes of Republican Lee Atwater, Republican Newt Gingrich, Republican Rush Limbaugh, and Republican Karl Rove has done its work. And other than geographically, there are no more categories in this country to which we can apply the term Americans any longer.
Yep.
Yeah. So imagine how tired you might be if you've been saying, this thing is a growing, terrifying threat that we need to address right now because the people who are occupying this country with us hate us. They're not part of us. They don't think of themselves as part of our country. They're trying to destroy us, and we're not. There's no we. There's not what the American people want. There's not what voters want. And coming up on 20 years later, somebody says, you know what? Here's the thing. There doesn't seem to be a we in America anymore. And you get a rousing round of applause from The Atlantic and a nice paycheck, and you get interviewed here and there, all of which is fine. But God damn, it's way past too late to be coming to that realization.
Yeah, and you're not alone in having said that.
No,
I mean, it is good that you have archives that you can search and you know you wrote this.
Exactly.
There have been a great many bloggers during the 2006 era who were writing, there's something seriously wrong when we're talking about we, and people are perfectly okay with invading the wrong country.
Yep.
And dropping off a pallet of millions of dollars and letting it disappear and so forth. Yeah.
And torture and so forth. Yeah.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about mental health for a moment. We get an email at least once every other day from someone or a letter saying, putting on the memo line of the check, sanity, or you keep me sane. And we so appreciate that. We want you to know that we're right there with you. Talking like this to you keeps us sane.
Yep.
At least a little bit. And so I was really appreciative of a random person on Twitter who goes by Mel saying something that I've been thinking and that I'm sure many other people have been thinking. I think it's worth amplifying this. This is about the Trump trials. Quote, "At this point, I just have serious Trump fatigue. The trials are breaking story after breaking story, but nothing ever changes and nothing ever happens to him. I wish I could be optimistic about this, but it's hard."
Yep.
Unquote. And first of all, Driftglass, I just can't wait for Dark Brandon to have presidential immunity. Let me just say that up front.
We're going to be so rich. You and I
are going to be so rich when that happens.
Right, because he's just going to give us lots of money. I mean, that's what happens.
He's going to hand over the keys to the White House and let us come in and pick out what we want.
Well, the keys to Fort Knox. I mean, the Soros money we're getting now will seem like peanuts compared to
Fort
checks.
Knox.
Yeah, and first thing I'm going to do is buy Twitter because I want.
Oh yeah, for $1.
For $1. Yeah. For $1.
It'll be worth $1 by the time you get to do that. But
it's smelly and it's full of Nazis, but we'll let you have it for $1 as long as you get the hell off our property.
For $1.
Yeah.
But look, here's what I'm doing. At times when I feel like, okay, I would like to be informed about what's going on with the Trump trials.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to Midas Touch Legal AF. I listen to Prosecuting Donald Trump, or watch my lawyer, Andrew Weissman. He's on Prosecuting Donald Trump, but he's also on Lawrence O'Donnell all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, hush, my lawyer's talking when he comes on. When I feel like I want to tap into that, there's an opportunity to do that with those podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm feeling overwhelmed and hopeless about it, I don't.
Right.
I don't tune in.
No.
Because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legal scholar.
Right.
And really swimming in that all the time in the step-by-step. I did that during the Mueller stuff.
Right. Yep.
And look where it got us.
Yep.
I'm not worried about delays in court stuff because I was married to a lawyer and I know how long trials take. I know how long court stuff takes. So that I've got sort of under my belt, and a lot of people don't, and they think, why is this taking forever? Well, it really isn't. But the only other thing I would add to that is if you are talking to anyone else about this, it's important to keep in your mind and bring up in conversation if need be particularly if someone says, Biden is going after Trump. Grand juries of regular citizens are the ones that put the indictments up for Trump.
Yeah.
It wasn't Fani Willis.
Nope.
It wasn't Jack Smith. They put together juries of citizens who looked at the evidence and said, yes, there is enough evidence to charge Donald Trump with a crime.
It wasn't the squad?
It wasn't the squad.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't Washington.
AOC pulling the strings?
It wasn't, no. It wasn't Soros.
Soros, no.
It was regular citizens like you and me brought to a jury on jury duty to look at the evidence and see if there was enough evidence to put him on trial.
Yep.
And, my ex-husband wrote a book on William Kunstler, who tried some really, truly awful people in his life. He defended some really, truly awful people. He defended John Gotti. He defended the strangler, one of the stranglers in Central Park, who was mentally ill and a murderer. And the prosecuting attorney at the end of that trial went up and hugged William Kunstler because this guy deserved a fair trial. Donald Trump deserves a spirited defense.
That's right. That's right.
And, he's getting the defense he can afford, like many people on trial get the defense he can afford, which is sad for poor people, but I'm not feeling sorry for Donald Trump for 1 minute. And he's on trial because a grand jury of citizens decided there was enough evidence to put him on trial.
That's right.
So listen for that signal rather than the noise. Absolutely. And if you need to turn off the noise, go ahead, because you're not on the jury and you're not in the courtroom.
That's right.
And that's not your job.
And honestly, going back to the church we were at, the Sunday school we were at, one of the people in our classroom, after we have this kind of discussion every Sunday, it's not quite as explicitly political as this, but it does come up. It's, one of the people will almost invariably say, yeah, but, the people who actually need to hear what we're saying are not in this room and never will be.
Yeah.
So the people who are causing you such agita, causing you such angst, are unreachable by you. None of this matters to them. None of this matters to them. So you don't need to immerse yourself in the process. You just need to know that there was a process going on. It's being handled by professionals. It's being adjudicated by citizens who are listening and weighing the evidence. And
we may have justice and we may not.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. But we do what we can do. And one thing we can do is know that next November, Donald Trump is on trial in the court of public opinion.
Yes. Yep.
And we can do everything we can to make sure he's found guilty there. He has lost every election since that surprise election in 2016. And he's going to lose this next one by a lot.
Yes, he will.
Because women are pissed. Women have had their bodily autonomy taken away and they're pissed.
That is our hope.
Yeah.
We do not have access to
And I'm going to work from that standpoint and that optimism.
We do not have access to secret polls or inside information or campaign literature.
But I'm going to work from that perspective because I need that hope to keep going.
That's right.
And my job as a citizen is postcards to voters, calls for Biden, $5 a month to Sherrod Brown. That's where I've decided to put our $5, Driftglass, is Ohio, because I was born in Ohio. And I love Sherrod Brown, and I love Sherrod Brown's wife. And so that's where we're going to put our money, our $5, to try to make a difference and elect a Democrat to the U.S. Senate, a re-elected Democrat to the U.S. Senate.
And that's why Dark Brandon needs presidential immunity, so we can get that $5 back.
Absolutely.
Get that $5
Give Dark
back.
Brandon presidential immunity, please.
So we can have money. So he'll fund it. We won't be asking you guys for money. Just it'll all get funded by the White House. It'll be funded.
I'll give $50 to Sherrod Brown after Dark Brandon gets presidential immunity.
You won't, because he's going to be appointed senator for life by Dark Brandon.
That's right, Dark Brandon.
That's what emperors get to do.
Congress schmongress.
Yeah, it all gets real ludicrous the minute you think about it. Just for a second, like wait a minute.
Why are you impeaching somebody who wasn't elected president? Shut up.
Well, if presidents could do anything they want, then they're emperors, right? And if that's the case, well, cool, because our guy's in there now. That's great. That's great news for us.
Yeah.
Now, as we've talked about, 2006 and 2004 and the before time, et cetera. And so I would like to comment a little bit on what I refer to as the Never Trump event horizon of history. Now, You're all very smart. You all understand physics. You all know what a black hole is. You probably all know what an event horizon is. It's the point around a black hole beyond which light cannot escape.
Mm-hmm.
Light can't get out because it would have to travel faster than the speed of light to escape the well of gravity it's in. So it's a literal dark spot. It's a black hole. Nothing escapes it. And the black hole of history, the event horizon of history for Never Trumpers is the point beyond which they will not talk about what went on. It just doesn't exist to them anymore. It just isn't there anymore. And that's why they don't go into places where people ask them those questions. And since they've colonized the media, they by and large get to get away with it. They by and large get to say, for the last 7 years, for the last 8 years, for the last 6 years. And they're never going to put themselves in a place where someone will ask them, like some asshole liberal blogger, what about 20 years ago? What about 30 years ago? What about Rush Limbaugh? What about Lee Atwater? Because they don't want to talk about that, because that's very scary to them. That makes them complicit. It also makes the media complicit because the media let them get away with it at that time. So there's a lovely article in the New York Times, which I have slandered just 10 minutes ago. And I want to read you the first and last paragraph of this New York Times story. It's by Carlos Lozada. And I think they're very instructive. The title of the story is Liz Cheney is Very Worried. And here's the first paragraph. Deep in her new book, Oath and Honor, Liz Cheney points out that the likeness of Clio, the Greek muse of history, is found in the Capitol's National Statuary Hall. Clio is depicted riding in the chariot of time, making notes in the book in her hand, Cheney writes, as a reminder that what we do in the Capitol building is written in the pages of history, unquote. Now, the next paragraph, which I did not transcribe here, I apologize, goes on to say that Cheney is now writing history. She's writing the history of our times, and she is casting herself as the protagonist in that story. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. However, if you jump to the last paragraph of the story, see if this sounds familiar, like something you might have heard on your favorite liberal podcast a million times already over the last 13 years. Quote, yet for all the insider detail Cheney offers, her memoir is truncated, treating the period between the 2020 election and the January 6th attack as the beginning of history, or the only history that matters, as though no prior warnings about Trump had been warranted or even audible. Cheney once believed in the staying power of the country's constitutional principles, she writes, quote, but all that had changed on January 6th of 2021. Because, unquote. And they all fucking do it. They all do it. Stuart Stevens might be the only one who acknowledges that the Republican Party has been on this trajectory for a very, very long time, and that he sort of knew that it was going on, but he didn't think it would be that bad, and he participated in it, and he's very, very, very sorry. The rest of them all have various, I don't know how to say this, very well thought out or very exaggerated or very rococo excuses for why it's not their fault or they didn't know or whatever, which is why my attitude towards Never Trumpers has always been as one with Frankie Five Angel's opinion about Hyman Roth.
Frankie, you know my father did business with Hyman Roth. He respected him.
Your father did business with Hyman Roth? Your father respected Hyman Roth, but your father never trusted Hyman Roth.
Let's do a news roundup, Blue Gal.
Let's do a news roundup, Frankie Five Angels.
House Republicans voted to authorize their impeachment inquiry into Joseph Robinette Biden. They did. When Republican Representative Ken Buck, who was, I thought, on the fence or iffy, I thought this was a bad idea, was asked why he ultimately voted to formalize the GOP's impeachment inquiry, he pointed to his good buddy, GOP Representative Andy Biggs, and said, he buttered me up. Unquote.
He told you you'd be primaried.
Yeah. Or, chased out of town on a rail.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ron DeSantis is still today trying to flank Trump from the right.
Yeah.
This week, he criticized Trump for not pardoning J6 traitors on his last day in office. Or, as DeSantis refers to them, quote, people that got caught up in the Capitol stuff.
They were just unquote. On a picnic. They were on some kind of family outing. They thought it was Disneyland, and they just wandered into a crowd, and it all went wrong. In other Florida news, Florida Republican chairman and alleged three-way rapist Christian Ziegler is reportedly demanding a $2 million payout to resign his office.
Man.
Yeah.
Just the worst people in the world.
They're
raped somebody, and I've got it. They've got it on tape on my phone. Pay me $2 million, and I'll get out of town.
Yeah, and I'm destroying the party from within. And if you give me, it reminds me of a call Donald Trump made to Ukraine in a certain way.
It's extortion.
Extortion is our business. Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk's bad week. Number one, Tesla recalls nearly all vehicles sold in the U.S. to fix the system that monitors drivers using autopilot.
By the
Number
way,
two,
that's all vehicles in the United States going back to like 2016.
It's a lot.
It's 2 million vehicles. It's all of them.
It's almost the Twitter. It's almost like it's the same value as Twitter.
Yeah.
$1. Number two, Elon's company SpaceX lost the appeal to receive $886 million in FCC funding for Starlink to provide rural broadband nationwide. The FCC reaffirms a decision to cancel funding for a Starlink expansion in rural areas over doubts that SpaceX is, quote, reasonably capable of offering the required high-speed, low-latency service, unquote. And number three, Media Matters for America has sued Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in federal court late Monday, alleging that Paxton violated Media Matters' First Amendment rights last month and chilled its work when he opened an investigation into the organization over its reporting into Elon Musk's X app. The lawsuit does not allege that Musk and Paxton are colluding, but it says Paxton was one of several, quote, politicians and media figures, unquote, who swiftly jumped to Musk's cause. Mm-hmm. And that's a no-no. They are a media organization. He is a political official. They are not supposed to do that.
Yeah. In further Florida news, Casey DeSantis, Ron DeSantis' Lady Macbeth, suggested that moms and grandmoms from out of state come to Iowa to illegally participate in the Iowa caucus, which is also called election fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Yay,
from the Too Little Too Late file, Fox board member Paul Ryan slams Trump, hails Cheney and Kinzinger. Quote, Trump's not a conservative. He's an authoritarian narcissist, unquote. Wow. Real convenient that you're no longer in the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan, or you'd have to vote to impeach Biden.
And you're on the Fox board, and your total contribution to turning the organization around is to sit on your hands, do nothing, and collect a paycheck. So fuck right off, Paul Ryan. Trump says that he'll implement a religious test for immigrants if he is elected. Quote, if you don't like our religion, then we don't want you in our country, unquote.
Our religion?
Yeah, well, we know what his religion is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. John Devine, one of the Texas Supreme Court judges that issued an order preventing a pregnant woman whose unborn child had a fatal defect from getting an abortion. And you know how personal this is to me, Driftglass. This was my mom. Mm-hmm. Was arrested several times for blocking abortion clinics. His wife carried a risky pregnancy to term. The child died. He has been arrested for blocking the entrance to abortion clinics. Yeah. He's a nut job.
He's a nut job. And that's why he's doing very well in the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. Breaking news, allies of Hungary's far-right Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and obviously allies of Putin, will hold a closed-door meeting with Republicans in Washington to push for an end to the U.S. support for Ukraine. Punchline? The event will be hosted by the Heritage Foundation. Remember the Heritage Foundation, Blue Gal?
Mm-hmm.
Also, that's the same Heritage Foundation that is leading Project 2025, which is a coalition recruiting perverts, sadists, dimwits, and fascists to staff the next Republican administration. So, yeah.
Yeah, we need some serious campaign finance reform and looking into how much Russia is giving these dark money groups. Rudy Giuliani is on trial, Driftglass.
I heard.
And it's not going very well for him. Rudy Giuliani's lawyer told a D.C. jury in his defamation trial that the Georgia election workers he defamed are asking for the, quote, civil equivalent of the death penalty, and that if the jury imposes damages high enough, it would be the end of Mr. Giuliani. Well, that'd be a shame.
Rooting for injuries.
He also told the jury that Giuliani won't testify because, quote, these women have been through enough. He also said that his client wasn't patient zero in the disinformation campaign against Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman. That would be Gateway Pundit.
Yeah.
Don't forget, that Newsmax anchors have urged viewers to donate to Rudy's Defense Fund, which redirects to a Newsmax-hosted domain, indicating that Newsmax processes the actual donations the website receives. The website offers potential donors the opportunity to mail physical checks to a Florida P.O. box, which is also listed on the Newsmax contact page as its mailing address.
It's just one big grift of morons.
One big grift.
New York's highest court has ordered a new congressional map, which could ultimately allow Dems to draw a new map in time for the 2024 elections, which could be a huge deal for House control for Democrats.
It could be. Yeah,
Could be.
hard to say, but it could be.
Yeah.
James Comer thinks the problem with Fox News is that it's too hard-hitting. Quote, I quit going on Fox and Friends because of Ducey. He's the one guy on Fox that's been very critical of the investigation. I have my theory why, but I don't think the average viewer at Fox News agrees with Ducey, unquote.
Probably not. The average Fox News viewer is a
Ducey keeps
brain-dead
looking
zombie.
for evidence.
Yeah, just give me anything, man. Just give me anything. And that makes James Comer poop himself, which is why he goes on Newsmax now, the official funding organization of the Rudy Giuliani
Defense Fund.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great how it works out? Speaking of corrupt assholes who are maybe getting their just desserts, Project Veritas CEO Hannah Giles, who replaced right-wing activist James O'Keefe earlier this year, says she is quitting the group after discovering, quote, evidence of past illegality and past financial improprieties, unquote, that she's handed over to law enforcement. Big surprise there.
She's shocked that gambling is going on at this facility. She
Never noticed it until just now, Blue Gal.
Yep.
Just this minute.
From Politico, Bidenomics is a big hit outside the United States. The president's signature climate law, with its massive subsidies and push for domestic manufacturing, has leaders across the UK, Australia, and Europe scrambling to follow suit. It's probably the most impressive piece of legislation in my lifetime. Ex-diplomat Marc-André Blanchard, an executive at Canada's biggest pension fund, told Politico at the COP28 UN climate talks in Dubai. Trump has promised to rip out the climate law root and branch.
Yeah. The choice is so goddamn stark. The COP28 climate summit ended in a historic deal that committed the world to, quote, transitioning away from fossil fuels, unquote, for the first time. Which,
and hopefully that will be the case. Environmentalists aren't happy, but that's their job.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Just remember, they're going to continue to push, and that's good for them. Right.
Stay frosty activists.
That's exactly right. That's Al Gore's job, is to be unhappy with whatever they do and push them to do more. The Supreme Court will decide whether to limit access to the commonly used abortion pill, mifepristone. They should tread very carefully. We doubt that they will, but they should.
They should. There's a lot of things they should do.
Yeah.
We're just going to do a whole podcast entitled Things People Should Do.
Things People Should Do.
And it's going to be an upbeat, cheerful podcast about all the things people should do. And then we're going to do another podcast about and they're not gonna. And that's going to be a sad podcast.
No one will listen to.
No one will listen to, but, we'll have fun doing it. A federal appeals court rejected Trump's attempt to use presidential immunity in the upcoming defamation lawsuit brought by writer E. Jean Carroll for comments he made while denying her rape accusations in 2019. Turns out presidential immunity may or may not exist, but it definitely has a statute of limitations less than 3 years.
Yes. Trump's attorneys didn't bring up presidential immunity until 3 years into this trial.
Yeah.
And the judge said, yeah, you're a little late.
Yeah. Bullshit. Sorry. Too late.
There is something going on with this NBC story that bears mentioning. Quote, Kate Cox, the plaintiff in a legal challenge to Texas abortions bans, left the state to get an abortion after her fetus received a fatal diagnosis. Again, this is very triggering to me. I'm sure it's triggering to you. Take that anger and move toward postcards to voters and getting the vote out in your district. That's what you need to do. The article at NBC goes on. Experts disagree about whether people who helped her face legal risks in Texas. The story never uses the word Republican once.
Yeah, it's a much, much longer story. This is just a paragraph out of it, but it never mentions who's on which side or who's doing what to who, which is...
And that's something else that you can do when you're channeling your anger. And anybody wants to discuss this, say, why are Republicans doing this? Why do Republicans hate women? You know, Republicans are really screwing women and not understanding women and not understanding pregnancy. What is wrong with Republicans that they're doing this?
Episode 3 of our Should podcast will be the media should mention Republicans when it's Republicans they're talking about.
We can do that. The point
Absolutely.
is that in your conversations around the dinner table or wherever you are, if anyone brings this up and is upset about that poor woman, you know, I'm against abortion, but that poor woman, you know, her baby's already dying and she could die and so forth. Yeah, Republicans fucked her over.
The Republicans. I wonder why it's okay.
Why
for
do Republicans want to do that to her?
Yeah. Well, is it something about Republicans? Maybe Republicans?
What is it about Republicans that they hate women so much?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Each week, we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is a sweet blue-eyed girl named Mary. Mary is a native Texas Siamese tortie mix who thinks that Texas Republicans are putzes. And of course, Mary eats freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store dreck, your cat will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured.
Freshly poured, oh my Lord, it's freshly poured.
And you can visit Mary, oh, she's such a pretty kitty, at our Facebook page or website. And you can send your Internet Kitty dog or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write to us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. What do we say? Go Postal Unions! Especially this time of year. They're so busy. Bless their hearts. Go Postal Unions, letter on the air unless you say otherwise.
Don't forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our actual job. If you can spare $5 a month, please spare $5 a month at patreon.com/proleftpod. Please share our show on social media. And if you love this podcast, please compel someone against their will to listen to it too. And thank you for doing that.
And make them listen to our last episode, the Tuesday No Fair Remembering stuff on immigration. I swear, it's the best episode we've done. I really enjoyed doing it. I'd really love it if you'd listen to it.
And you know what? It was a passion project for my wife. She really wanted to do that.
I wrote a lot of the script for that one.
Yeah.
Because I hate lies about immigration. And my dad was born in England, so I'm a first-generation American on my dad's side. So Maria Bartiromo gets some special treatment from me. Let me put it that way.
Very special episode.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, look, at the Internet Kitties, we want to remind everyone that however good your intentions may be, you should never, ever give someone a pet as a surprise gift. However, giving gifts to pets is strongly encouraged.
Make sure they have a stocking on the hearth.
Let's think about living.
Think about living.
Let's think about loving.
Think about loving.
Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2023 DGBG Productions.